Craig and Andy, thank you so much for joining us on the AWS for Data show. We're happy to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, it's good to be here.
Awesome. So Craig, you lead the data strategy team at AWS. Why don't you unpack that for us? What does the data strategy team do exactly?
Yeah, sure thing. So we work with organizations across all industries, helping them simplistically to deliver and create business and customer value out of data. And helping to do that in a way where executives and stakeholders across both business and technology can collaborate, because it's important to think about tying together technology with business to drive value, but importantly to deliver value quickly in areas that are priority so that you can create scalable mechanisms and strategies for data. So a lot of what we do is talk to these organizations about what good looks like, how they can think big, but how they can start effectively and show value and create momentum to scale change with data.
I'm guessing that's the part where your team fits in, right, Andy? The actual execution and how they can get past the technology barriers they have now to make that strategy a reality?
Yeah, that's exactly the case. You know, we have a bit of a saying in our team that we've got a whole lot of organizations, customers that have got data in all the wrong places. So we absolutely help them build the foundations of a modern data strategy. And that's how we closely interface with Craig and his team.
Awesome. And even at AWS, we see that there's so many more teams now that are focused around data and all aspects around it, around modernization, around the technology, around the culture management, the people change and all of that. And I think it's partially because, as people are saying, data is the new oil. But I think there's a gap here because organizations don't seem to be treating data like oil. Is that the case from your experience, Craig? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, we're seeing a growing trend now and an acknowledgement where data is a really valuable asset. More so than an asset, it's a product as well that many organizations realize they need to invest in, and they need to think about more as you would any other asset in your business. It needs to be managed effectively. You need to watch out for optimizing for the cost of how you progress and evolve that asset. And you need to procure the right value out of it as well. And so that's really catching on. And we're seeing, organizations like Wavestone who are now doing more research into the space where more and more customers or organizations now see that data as a product is really important.
So how is it that organizations should start treating data? I mean, you said they should treat it like an asset. How are they treating it now, and how should they treat it differently?
We've been talking about this a lot because there's a connectedness between our teams and how we think about this. And so I think the key thing here is that, to riff on what I just said, when you think about how you might run any other business, and we can pick retail as an example, there are different elements to how you operate a business. And you can do the same when you operate your data business. So you have a cost of goods sold. You want to be able to optimize for that bottom line for how you procure data, where you source it from, how to migrate and modernize it in a way so that it is essentially, you're manufacturing your data and keeping it in good inventory so it can be really used. So there is a cost of goods sold. And that's the same as a retail store that might, find materials, raw materials, manufacture and store those. So the other piece then is revenue. And so if I was a retailer, I want to maximize revenue through sales of the goods I've created. As a data business, I want to deliver many use cases that are valuable to my business. So I want to optimize on the cost of goods sold, how I procure, manage, and maintain my data, and maximize on the revenue. And the third part of the equation then is, selling general and administrative costs. And so if I'm a retailer, my focus there is on brand image, marketing, creating good culture and good customer experience around my product. The same applies to data. You are marketing that to your business. You're creating the right brand, and you're creating a really great customer experience to your business around the data. A lot of that is changing the culture towards data in the business. So I think, to answer your question in short, when we think about how CDOs should think effectively about data, now as an asset or a product, requires a considerate view around optimizing for cost of goods sold, maximizing for revenue, and investing in selling and generative administrative costs that market your data effectively.
So I love this analogy of, treating data as you would an asset and using the constructs that we understand about business, costs of goods sold and SG&A for the bottom line and revenue for the top line, to look at the holistic picture of the health of my business. And if we do the same with data, we can look at the health of our data business.
100%.
So when it comes to your team executing on the ground, Andy, how does it think about building that use case factory, the raw materials that you would use in your COGS when you're shifting that paradigm for organizations that you're working with?
Yeah, it's quite simple actually, and I also love that concept as well. I think it really resonates well with customers and organizations. I think if we start by just simply helping reduce the cost of kind of managing and procuring that data, we have a concept at Amazon. It's been around for most of our existence called the flywheel.
Right.
And by reducing the cost, you're actually helping organizations get more access to that data, and the value of that data then helps increase your profitability, et cetera, which continues the flywheel, et cetera. So more business value is driven back to the business. So we're pretty instrumental in helping our teams really unlock the value of some of those legacy data assets, really start to reduce some of the costs of managing, running, and continuing to ensure that the business is driving value from that data.
So to use that analogy of manufacturing use cases and the flywheel, if you were manufacturing something, you need to get land, you need to get a factory set up, you need to get staff, you need to buy specialized equipment, you need to set up maintenance contracts, and then once the lines are producing your product, then you reap the value from it. And the more you produce, the less the marginal cost of each product, right? So in that same analogy, would you say that there's a technological parallel in the data world when it comes to building technology infrastructure for data analytics specifically?
I think so, and I think the great news is we've done a lot of the heavy lifting for organizations. So we've got processes, programs, tools, and technologies to help our customers kind of build that factory, if you like, to access those legacy data assets, build that modern data foundation, and then to Craig's point earlier, they could really start to drive and leverage that business value from that data.
Yeah. 100%.
And once they get those lines going, the flywheel kind of moves, and each new use case becomes cheaper to roll out and can add business value in a shorter amount of time.
Completely.
That's very much it.
So let's take this to its logical extension, right? If I'm putting my data accountant hat on now, I'm going to start looking at my line items. Let's start with COGS. Let's unpack that a little bit. What does the data COGS actually look like?
Yeah, so we can look at this a bit, and your point's very relevant from the last question around start line by line, drive value and then scale into that cost over time, like you would with a business. You choose your beachheads, your first products, deliver value there, and then scale your business over time. Same applies for data. And if you look at the cost of goods sold pieces, you want to start by understanding, what does my data supply chain look like?
Yeah.
What are the data sets that I want to focus on, which are the most valuable for my organization, and how can I unlock those as quickly as possible to broaden the aperture of access to my business for that data? So a key piece on that is make sure that I can make that data as easily accessible in the best format for my business. Okay. And a big piece of that is migrating and modernizing the data stores, right? Okay. Extend that analogy a bit more to this retail business. You also want to be able to then store that data in a way that you are adequately accounting for inventory. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Many retailers that I work with have issues with duplicate stock keeping units. Yeah. A t-shirt can have many different definitions. Yeah. A pair of jeans can have many different, and it's a problem for them. Right. The same thing applies for data. Okay. Catalog your data in a way that's consistent, have uniformity so you have good optimal stock keeping unit for your data. And that's a big part of your cost of goods sold on data as well.
So building that supply chain, basically looking at the data lifecycle end to end and cataloging what you have so that you're using it efficiently.
Yes.
Right? So Andy, how would we build something like that out? Like say that we're working with an organization, they don't really know where all of their data is and they're not able to streamline it exactly. What would be the steps that you would advise them to follow so that they can start to build that supply chain out and have proper inventory management?
So that's a great question. Typically in AWS, we have a concept of working back from the customer problems and challenges. So we start with the customer's goals in mind and work all the way backwards to understand where their current data assets reside. And we look at opportunities to modernize, to migrate those assets, and basically really to drive and give access to the organization access to that data so they can really drive that value. In fact, there was a recent Forrester study, Craig, I'm sure you've got the stats.
Yeah. So like Forrester has this great study, and I love this quote around, for a typical Fortune 1000 business, if they can just increase access to data by 10%, they'll typically see $65 million in revenue uplift. So just increasing access to data, hugely advantageous to any business, essentially.
So what you're saying here is that even improving your COGS will also improve the top line. It'll improve the revenue as well.
It'll improve the propensity for people to leverage data in a valuable way.
Okay.
Yes.
So it'll break down the friction to actually realize that.
We'll come on, I think, in a bit to talk more about how to maximize revenue out of that data as well.
But at the same time, there's a really important factor as well, because they're actually driving that cost of ownership of that data down as well. So, they're able to reduce license costs, they're able to reduce costs of actually managing and running those databases. They're predominantly doing a lot of manual heavy lifting on premises. So they start with leveraging those cost savings, and they start that flywheel we spoke about earlier, really moving to leverage the access to that data.
But is the cost question just a dollar value, or is it also opportunity cost? Is it also the cost of having to do a lot of administration? Is it the cost of lost agility?
Right.
I would say it's all of those things. Craig, you would
100% agree. And we often talk in Amazon about removing undifferentiated heavy lifting, which essentially means reduce manual, non-productive work. And when we think about data supply chains and platforms, there tends to be a lot of that in legacy. You have to manage downtime, licensing, and maintenance activity. And if you modernize, a lot of that becomes taken away, which maximizes the opportunity to deliver agility, to be more innovative in how you can deliver data to your business as well.
I think an important part of the COGS equation is being able to scale down the COGS when the revenue scales down again, especially if you have a seasonal business or a downturn like the one that a lot of the world is facing now. Do we have a similar concept when it comes to building the data COGS paradigm?
Yeah, I think so, 100%. And I like the way we're really working this analogy. It's still holding. But I think just as you would have to invest in a flexible supply chain in times of economic uncertainty, you should have a flexible data supply chain, and cloud's a great place for that. Because if you invest in serverless, and if you invest in serverless infrastructure across your data platforms, you can scale down what you're utilizing to meet with the demands of your business at that point in time. And to your point, then optimize the cost of your goods.
But is it just about the platform, or is it about how they set up the supply chain and the processes and the people involved in streamlining it?
It's definitely a piece of that as well. And I think having, the dynamic ability to source and procure data as a service as well plays a big part into that. I mean, Andy, what are your thoughts on the people piece as well?
Well, I think the more that organizations can invest in modern technologies, they can reallocate those very costly and expensive resources to actually drive business value. And we're seeing that increasingly, talking to CIOs, CTOs, they're looking to that automation, to those modern solutions to actually really unlock that high value resource.
I think there's a lot of value in that, and the streamlining the COGS part is clear. What is a bit unclear to me is where the parallel to SG&A comes into play. What is that kind of in the data world?
So, when you think about this, one of the biggest challenges for any data practitioner, and there's good research from Wavestone around this, in that, almost every organization overwhelmingly understand the value of data, right? 99% of organizations get it. Only 24% are successful. And that hasn't changed in 5 years. A big part of that is related to culture and people. And so when we think about SG&A, we're talking about how do you invest to elevate the data culture of your organization? How do you make people aware of the value of it? That ties into how do you brand what data is for your organization? You want to market success stories. When you're delivering great use cases, whether it is we've just saved or increased uplift in marketing, to acquire an extra 10% of customers or stopped churn by 5%. Socialize that. That's your branding equation, right? You want to then be able to invest in great customer service. In SG&A, customer service is a line in any normal business. Create that good customer service when it comes to data. Give them a great experience to access the data they need with the right tools. So those are all elements that I see coming together, which are critical and often underlooked areas. And like I was saying, they prove to be the most fundamental stumbling blocks for many organizations.
Right. So just like SG&A in a regular business, you need payroll and you need to have your tax controls in place. You need all of these foundational things to enable the COGS to even function. In the same way, you need the data SG&A, the people, the culture, their skills, the way they interact with their customers to enable the COGS process to even happen. So we talked about the COGS and the SG&A. These are both cost line items, expense line items. They cover the bottom line. Let's talk about the top line a little bit, which is supposed to be revenue, which is the point of the use cases, the data use case factory in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think a good place to begin is kind of like where Andy left off earlier, talking about working backwards.
Yeah.
And so when you think about growing value or revenue with data, focus on the priorities in your business where data can really help to deliver and solve for those things. And so that could be anything from delivering better, compelling experiences for customers that grows sales in your organization, or taking the cost out of your supply chain, or predicting fraud. Focus on those areas and deeply solve for those business problems with data. Work backwards from the problem to the right solution. And importantly, make sure that you are tracking and articulating that value back. Many organizations are poor at this. They don't establish the right mechanisms to actually track the value added to that business. And then they don't advertise it to the rest of the organization. So those are some of my considerations when you think about revenue. It's create those flywheels, work backwards from priorities to the right solutions, maximize the value of the data investments you've made in doing so to then maximize the value out of it as well.
So you touched on an important point, which is measurement, right?
Yeah.
How do you actually make sure that whatever data projects you're working on are reaping the right value that it's supposed to be delivering?
It's probably an area of focus for your team.
Yeah, I think so. When we look at measurement, there's a few things, and I already mentioned that the place to begin is by identifying the priorities that sit within your business, and mapping those to the metrics that align to those priorities. So, like, if I want to, create better long-term customer engagement, I probably want to make sure that my churn or my drop-off of customers out of my organization is minimized, right? And so that's a metric that we'd identify as part of that equation. As we go to then deliver the data use case that aligns to that, we would leverage things like customer data. We might create new recommendation engines to detect signs or signals of churn and proactively prevent that from happening. As we deliver those use cases into the business, we'd want to make sure that we've established a benchmark for what churn was before, what it is afterwards. Have we shown an uplift that's valuable? So to kind of like recap there, it's focus on those priorities, identify the metric that aligns to the priority, embed that metric in the process as you deliver the data use case so you can track the uplift versus the benchmark, and continue to do so. Rinse and repeat, right?
It becomes a process, not a one-off.
Yes, yeah.
And one of the things that really resonated with me when we spoke earlier was successful CDOs are looking across all the different aspects of their data strategy, not just one aspect or migrating their data, for example. They're cognizant of all those different steps in the process.
That's a really good point, Andy. And so what I just said there is very much focused on the value equation. Successful CDOs need to be able to capitalize on the value that they're seeing. And so what I mean by that is the more you can show the case for data to your business and show the value, the more you can make the case to invest in further migration, further modernization, further broadening the access of data. The more you can do that, the more you increase the aperture for innovation on data to deliver more value. And that flywheel continues to grow momentum. So yes, focus on those metrics and proving out how you measure for value uplift, but use that to capitalize on investment and help the business to understand what does your balance sheet look like for data, right? There is a profit and loss here that you can easily equate to your business.
What's the snapshot of my data assets and what value are they producing?
How are we sweating our assets? Right?
I think the measurement part, it sounds to me like it's part of the SG&A, right? Because it is an enabler foundation for the rest of the process. Because the people who are delivering the COGS, they're heads down, focusing on actually building the value. There needs to be other teams infusing the actual monitoring and the measurement of the outcomes there.
And we sometimes see teams like value realization teams or value frameworks that would sit in an SG&A line. Essentially, they are accountable for tracking that. They are the accountants of data.
Sure.
Right.
They're the ones that are. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think this framework is super useful, right? You've got your COGS, your SG&A, and your revenue from a data business perspective. If I'm starting from scratch, what do I do first? What's the right order, or not the right order, let's say, the optimal order to actually make this successful?
Do you know, I think there's probably not a formula for the right order. I think, we look at each customer, organizational maturity individually. Definitely, again, going back to the working backwards process, we understand where a customer's at the moment. And again, try and figure out the best way to help them. It could be that, they're right now really stuck with some legacy challenges. So the first building block might be to build that modern foundation. It could be that, perhaps they're more mature from a data foundation perspective, and they really need to figure out how they can, really drive and leverage the value from that data.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And I think like a savvy CDO, she or he should look for those points to create momentum. Whether it is starting to just take cost out of the equation, increasing access, showing first value. You can start in any of those places, but you need to be savvy around then how you use what you've done to create momentum.
I mean, I think that makes sense, because let's say if you talk to, a CDO who's building a new B2C organization, who just has it's just been funded by another Series B round of venture capital. Growth is the most important thing, so they'll be focusing on the top line.
Right.
But if you have, let's say, a bank with 200 branches, and they're about to embark on some kind of data business that they need to build, there may be some housekeeping that's required first, and they need to cut from the bottom line so that they're actually lean enough for the flywheel to even take place. So I think that makes a lot of sense, right? For each of the businesses that are looking to embark on this journey, they need to look at, okay, what's my priority here? Do I need to cut cost, or do I need to optimize for revenue? Or do I need to build a culture, right? Do I need to get the right people on board first who can do all of this?
And there'll be seasons for that, depending on your business state, right? 100%.
Makes a lot of sense. So again, I know I said it before, but I do love this framework. It's an easy way to think about how we can actually get the most value out of the data assets that we have, which is not a paradigm that people are used to thinking about. If somebody wants to learn more and actually dive deeper on this topic, where can they go?
You go for it.
Well, I was going to say, Craig and his team have recently put together a fantastic ebook, which I think there's going to be links at the end of this recording. Personally, I recently read it, and I thought it was a really incredible document. So really, gave me some great insights, leverages that model that you talk about, and really resonated with me and with our customers.
I'd add to that to say, between Andy and my team, we have, we were talking just now about what are the starting points. So whether you're looking to migrate or modernize, there are great programs at AWS, like Reimagine Data, or whether you're looking to innovate and show value, there are programs like Data Driven Everything or D2E. And these programs come together to drive your holistic view of data as a business.
Thank you so much. I think this was a great paradigm that would be useful for anybody who is used to managing a business top down. And applying it for data, I think, will help to reduce that value gap of people who are not able to capitalize on their data assets now and making it a reality in the future. It was great having you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great being here. Thank you.